Welcome to the Community Changemakers Podcast with Siraj Syed of Your Authentic Self-Work and Sue Blythe of the Future Flash Project. Part of the 11 Days of Global Unity, 11 Campaigns for Change, sponsored by We the World, online at we.net, and hosted by the Florida Coalition for Peace and Justice. Today we're speaking about unity with Maver and Ulfik. Dot is president of the National Peace Academy, bringing a focus on peacebuilding and peacelearning to the USA, inspiring cooperation on behalf of the common good and utilizing a shared responsibility and shared leadership model to bring together individuals and groups around a common purpose while creating environments that demonstrate right relationship in a culture of peace. Ulfik is the founder and board chair of We the World and the We campaign, focusing on creating a blueprint for global transformation through collaboration and partnership to create the comprehensive changes we need for a world that works for all. The 11 Days of Global Unity, produced by the Shift Network in partnership with We the World, has become a worldwide platform, linking changemakers and their awareness and action campaigns to an inspiring global movement for the promotion of peace, justice, sustainability, and transformation. Join Sue Blythe and I, Siraj Syed, in finding out a little bit more about how this is done at the community level with the Community Changemakers Podcast.
That's what's been happening, right? There's a lot of need in this community that we're in Gainesville, Florida, in which there's a lot of disparity, a lot of disconnect that goes to a legacy space, legacy issues that have been longstanding in this community around racial injustice, immigrant injustice, socioeconomic injustice, lack of equity of access. So we just wanted to find, as a community, new ways in to the spaces in which everyone's voice is not only heard, but then we can move to an actionable space relative to what those voices are communicating. Right. So podcasts started to be one of those spaces, and doing them live in community, this kind of podcast-based work, other types of community exchanges, all coming from a theory base that I worked on through my doctoral research. And that was to engage in this process of developmental meaning making that essentially is it began as making meaning through situations of crisis or critical change that an individual may be going through or communities may be going through. And what that started to yield was really strong expressions of intent, if not actionable intent, but intent that is at least grounding the individual in a space where they are empowered and operate out of a space of self-efficacy, self-authorship, whatever the case may be. So what, for me, this whole process has grown into is to use these methods, these vehicles to engender personal and community activism around, we have these beautiful 11 themes that we're exploring through these 11 Days of Global Unity. So to really engender activism in this community and in other communities, and that's kind of the last thing that I would say, is that Gainesville, Florida, because of the unique structure of it between an academic institution, strong community-based organizations like the River Phoenix Center, working with them a lot in restorative justice spaces. This is a great demonstration proofing site, right? Like, if this is how it can be done here, and we can develop models that can be utilized in other spaces, share models through sister city projects with other communities. So that's kind of the vibe of where I am in all of this. And this is a wonderful opportunity. I'm so happy to be working with Rick and with We the World and now with you, Dot. So this is, I think it'll be good.
So Sue, and from your perspective then, now it's coming to me where the UNA piece was when you said Gainesville, Florida, of course, as founding executive director of the River Phoenix Center for Peacebuilding, being down there for years. So helping to develop that, and still very involved. So I hear you loud and clear, Siraj, and with the trauma resiliency and sacred activism and all of that. Yes. So Sue, where are you with all of that as we begin?
Yeah. So I guess my mission in life at this point is to bring the Earth Charter into awareness as a tool for a very whole and healthy way of living, and that we have developed wonderful relationships with people in different schools and churches and institutions that are supportive of the Earth Charter itself, and certainly the principles for a sustainable, just, and peaceful future. And so what we're working on now is a program of community education so that everybody can find their part in this transition to a new way of living, is the way I look at it. That we are coming into a time when the children of our generation now have grown up with cell phones in their pockets, and we are all connected quite literally through our technology, and just coming into an understanding of who we are at this time in human history, as a new kind of people living as a human family on a planet that is in trouble. And we need to figure out quickly how we're going to deal with that. And so my way of going about that is through story, children's stories, children's songs, children's dances, and just getting kids involved in telling stories of how that happened, and showing the ways that people are already living these principles and are bringing them to life in our communities. And I know I can point to people here in Gainesville, and we can get together and talk with each other. And the same thing is happening in communities all over Florida, and we're in connection with many of them. And then the same thing is happening all over the world. And I want to be able to give the kids in our schools in Florida a connection, just a very literal connection with people everywhere in the world. So my job is to find the people who are willing to play, and let's get going on this.
And play with them. And as I probably mentioned to you then, Sue, in the past when we met, the National Peace Academy, USA, uses the definition of peace from the Earth Charter. So,
and
right?
I did see that right on their letterhead.
Yeah, exactly. Peace is the wholeness created by right relationships with oneself, other persons, other cultures, other life, Earth, and the larger whole of which all are a part. So support and thank you for the work that you're doing with that.
Thank you.
And in fact, just to follow up on what Sue is saying, that we, as far as because I've been very excited to see this particular kind of Sue's curricular expression really come through in a space where we can really use it as a process of refining the curriculum and getting it ready for kind of a larger scale expression. So my son actually goes to a really cool school here in the School Board of Alachua County system, Healthy Learning Academy, and he's in 3rd grade, and they're open. So we're going to start kind of situated as an after-school club, kind of around character development and personal expression, things like that. But this particular curriculum coming in and being able to pilot that there so that we can actually, the principal has really strong ties with the school board. So if we can get that into the next semester in a few more schools, and it's like that old shampoo commercial, and they tell 2 friends and then they tell 2 friends and so on and so on. So things are moving. I mean, it's definitely the definition of a groundswell. It's coming up from community spaces, and for myself, I mean, what I really value about that, and we found other partners that value that as well, is that we are facilitated vehicles for those expressions and those actionable plans, as opposed to the creators and coordinators of such things. So that feels really good, frankly, because way too much work to do with a small group. So it's really great that we have a lot of coverage and a lot of allies that are building through.
That's beautiful. I appreciate the way you say that. And Rick and I have talked about this for years through much of the work that you do, Rick, about a co-creative emergent design process.
Yes. Yeah, that's, co-constructivism. That's a theory base that I really held dear to my heart, because that's the only way anything seems to really affect change, and I like that. I appreciate that very much as well. So speaking to that, I mean, it's that idea, right? Like this spirit of co-creation, Rick, as Dot said, that you've engendered. That's kind of where we wanted to start with this. Now we'll make a little bit of a break just before we get into that idea, is that we are going to have this kind of distinctive, pretend like it happened in two different moments in time and we all wore the same clothes and everything. Just so happened it was laundry day, right? But to have the introductory piece with Unity as being the first podcast, and then moving into the expression around peace as being the final one, but that one engendering that, this celebration of this is the International Day of Peace. So we'll kind of build that, stuff in as we go. But
so at what point are we going to say, okay, we're starting?
Let's do that right now. So
I was thinking maybe a good place for me to start would be to just give a little bit of background about 11 Days of Global Unity.
Perfect.
And then we can go into other aspects of unity and co-creation, like you were just talking about, and that kind of thing. Does that sound good?
That sounds great. And you can think about it as this will have been, this is Rick Ulfik of We the World, and a little bit of a bio, and then we fade into you, and you're starting to talk about 11 Days of Global Unity. So please, sir, commence.
Okay, well, it's a pleasure to be on with you folks. This is really exciting that you're doing these, teleseminars or telesummit on each of the 11 themes of 11 Days of Global Unity. So my name is Rick Ulfik. I'm founder of We the World and the We campaign at we.net. And I thought maybe I would start by just saying something about the origin of 11 Days of Global Unity. It was started in 2004, and We the World was able to bring together global partners to really celebrate the International Day of Peace. And the background with that is that the International Day of Peace itself was not always on September 21st. For a long time, since the UN resolution, which I believe was in 1981, and then starting in 1982 on, establishing the International Day of Peace to be celebrated at the start of the UN General Assembly sessions in September. And during those sessions, it was understood that any ceasefires that had taken place during the year up to that time would be celebrated. And in fact, the idea was eventually to go for having a global ceasefire of all conflicts on the International Day of Peace. So in the 1990s, the late 1990s, NGOs were getting into this idea and wanting to celebrate it. The problem was that if it was on the second Tuesday of September or the third Tuesday of September for the General Assembly at the UN opening session, that date would be changing each year. So people, especially led by Jeremy Gilley, who actually did a full-length documentary called Peace One Day about this idea of urging the the UN to put it on a specific date, namely September 21st. So unfortunately, it didn't officially take place until after, in 2001, there was the opening session of the General Assembly was scheduled to take place on September 11th, which was actually the date of the tragedy and the what everybody knows as 9/11 in 2001. And even though there was a resolution putting International Day of Peace on September 21st, it didn't go into effect till 2002. So we looked at that in We the World, and we thought this is an opportunity to talk about this concept of moving like a journey, the journey from fear to hope. So September 11th, so the International Day of Peace was scheduled for September 11th, 2001, the date of the tragedy, but then in 2002 and following is on September 21st. So we created 11 days of global unity to kind of commemorate that span there, or that journey, like I said, from fear to hope, from September 11th to September 21st. And it has become a convergence of festivals and conferences and broadcasts and all kinds of things taking place during that time. And it has become a platform for changemakers around the world to kind of showcase their work for peace, justice, sustainability, and transformation. And it's been growing every year. Like the first year we did it, we were working with Amnesty International and Jane Goodall and Roots and Shoots, and Marianne Williamson. There were a long list of honorary co-chairs with Jane and Marianne and Deepak Chopra and Robert Thurman and the Secretary General of Amnesty, and a long list. And there were 125 events around the world, different cities, and all this. And it's been growing. So every year there's interesting things, and what we're doing right now is yet another variation on all of the possibilities that are happening during 11 Days of Global Unity. And then in 2011, I believe it was, a bunch of the people who helped to launch 11 Days initially came together, and we decided to create 11 themes to go along with the 11 days. And those themes now have become full-blown campaigns with hundreds of organizations. I think it's near 600 organizations that actually went through the process of signing up to participate in what we call 11 ways to change the world, or 11 ways to transform your world, that kind of thing. And I guess what we're doing now is talking about the first one, unity, which is really exciting. And of course, it's very appropriate for the beginning of 11 Days of Global Unity. And so for We the World, unity is a crucial concept, especially now where we have all these major crises in the world that are taking place on many different levels. We have social, economic, political, and environmental crises. And I guess one of the reasons that I founded We the World 20 years ago, actually, this is our 20th year. 2018 is our 20th year. One of the reasons I founded it was to create a mechanism that would allow the world to come together to solve its problems. And more and more people realize need now, and I think the momentum is tremendous at this point. We're not there yet. However, we're getting much closer, and so anyway, we can get into more details, but that's a bit of the background for 11 days, and and a little bit about We the World. And of course, we invite everyone to get involved who's watching and listening to this at we.net, because it's all about we.
Yes, indeed. Thank you, Rick. It's interesting speaking about unity. I mean, the concept can mean a lot of different things to different people at different levels of their existence, from the intrapersonal to the macrosocial. But the idea of bringing together and creating a unification amongst change makers at so many different levels, and to create the space and to hold that space for 20 years at this point, which is remarkable. As a track record for multiple different organizations that I've been involved with, they can't claim that, right? So that's quite remarkable. That's a very important theme for me at this point, and the way it translates for me, that's especially relevant, is that there hasn't been a lot of unity. That's been one of the greatest challenges in terms of bringing people together across silos in a different way. We can speak to it in terms of intersectionality, right? And that is something that even very beautifully intentioned individuals working in their own spaces of social change may not necessarily see. So to actually create a vision for what that unity can look like across all of these helping hands is remarkable. So in speaking to that, Dot, I know you have been the progenitor of a space that I very much value in this community, and I value the people that I work with at the River Phoenix Center for Peacebuilding. If you could kind of begin possibly with that journey, and then how that journey has led into this moment in terms of how you situated your value around this work, as Rick explained his sense of value and how that grew and how that defined the infrastructure for what he wanted to really manifest. How did that begin for you?
Thank you, Suraj and Sue. It's good to be with all of you. And Rick, as you share your story and the founding of We the World, you are such a connector and networker and such a generous-hearted soul who is helping all of us find a way to unify our actions as we create the conditions for a culture of peace. So thank you.
Thank you.
Truly. It's good to be with you again. And yes, the journey began quite a while ago, and actually along the way, as an educator and peace builder, I would say that two of a number of highlights are indeed the River Phoenix Center for Peacebuilding in Gainesville, Florida, centerforpeacebuilding.org, and the National Peace Academy in the United States, and that's nationalpeaceacademy.us. Which is part of a broader network of the Global Alliance for Ministries and Infrastructures for Peace. That's GAMIP, GAMIP.org, for those who are interested. And as that journey began, for me, it's always about inspiring cooperation on behalf of the common good. Because there is no question that there is one planet Earth, not two, not three, one. And as the wombat is fond of saying, if we do not realize that, we are doomed. So knowing that there is one planet, we chose early on, actually, and thanks to some of the work that you've done, Sue, and all those, Mikhail Gorbachev and others who have developed with the help of 36 countries involved in the Earth Charter around the world. And throughout my work for peace as a peace builder, using the definition of peace from the Earth Charter. And simply put, in my own words, peace is living in right relationship with self, others, and all life. And in a way, that's the very definition of unity, because we live in a space where we are not really separate from anything. And yes, there is an all systems breakdown on the planet right now. I contend that we are crossing a threshold into, we might call it a renaissance, but certainly a culture of peace, an era of peace that we cannot hardly imagine the beauty and the grace and the joy and the vividness of that. And as you mentioned, Siraj, there are trends happening developmentally that I am seeing. And so when any of us chooses to put our energy through another form, I often think of the very definition of health is a free flow of spirit through form. So as we develop these forms that help us to show up in life in group, team, right, as a team, such as the River Phoenix Center for Peacebuilding, it's all about community, unity with. And so what is that about? And sports is my heartthrob, softball, fast pitch softball. I've always been about cooperative competition, and competition at the heart of the Olympics, the etymology, petare, petition. So we petition with one another to raise all of us to be our best, our better and best selves in support of the whole. So as this all systems breakdown is happening, there is a simultaneous all systems breakthrough. And some of the trends that we are seeing and that we are working with through the National Peace Academy and with the Phoenix Center and other groups that all of us are working with, share.org. Sharing is one of those principles that I think unifies us as we recognize through crop swap and car share and bike share and community gardens. We could go on, right? A country like Bolivia leading the way, setting a great example by stating clearly through legislation that Mother Earth is a sentient being, afforded all the rights. I mean, through the Earth Charter, right? Calling for that and helping all of us to begin to legislate and develop policy based on our essential shared values. And so as all of the crises that we are in portend this chrysalis moment for humanity, we're not going to save the caterpillar, but as Rick and I have spoken of over the years, we certainly can support the butterfly as it emerges and as it begins its flight. Right now, maybe we're drying our wings a bit, but there's just so many great examples through agriculture and economics and bioeconomics and just so many things we could talk about, including the final thing I'll say right now, trauma resiliency, because that in my way of thinking kind of holds all of us in a sacred space, an embrace, a loving embrace, and says, wow, we are all experiencing stress and our children need support. So do we all. And social emotional learning is important and all the things we know about trauma, stress, and resiliency. So I think it's a very exciting time to be alive. It's a very challenging time to be alive. And thank you for opening the door for this conversation about unity leading actually to peace. Because peace for me is not the goal. It's the natural outcome of working together in a spirit of cooperation.
That was beautifully expressed, Dot, and it's something that is very affirming in that statement, in the sense that there is a kind of a rising awareness of the moment that I've started to see personally and start to see across partners, members of the community. And Rick, it should then be said that this is all very synchronous, because not only is it then the 20th anniversary of We the World, we're about to lead into the 50th anniversary of Earth Day. All of this is happening. It's the road to 2020, as is a very impassioned expression that Sue has. So it's important to note that as this moment is emerging and there is a unity of response around that moment that is also emerging, then we are somehow synchronously, in a serendipitous way, we are finding our ways to that consciousness. And that is something that, Sue, you have expressed to me over the past couple of years that I've known you very much. You've always had a very keen sense of the moment and how things are developing forward. And you have a very unique ability to, at many different levels, connect people around that sense of not only what is happening, but the heart that they have for it in that particular moment. So would you speak a little bit about how you've come into this involvement with We the World, with Rick Ulfik, with Maver. How has this emerged for you, and what values have you drawn on in order to arrive at this moment?
Well, I feel like I need to go all the way back to 1985. And I was a brand new Baha'i at the time, and I was asked to join a delegation of people to study a statement. It was called the Peace Statement, but the full name was The Promise of World Peace from Vision to Reality. No, it wasn't.
That sounds good.
That was a conference I went to later. It was the Promise of World Peace statement to the peoples of the world. And I was asked to deliver this statement to our Congressman, Dante Fascell. And so I studied the statement with these 5 people. We went and we made our presentation, and it changed my life, because I had never been so empowered I feel like it was the first time that I had ever been part of something global, because this was being done in every country all around the world. It's people like me, regular folks, were going and doing their little part. And to understand the significance of that just really made me want to live my life in that space where I am an individual doing my part, and I am part of something so big and wonderful and magnificent, and my understanding of what that is has only been growing day by day by day by day since that time. And so the way that this has happened for me over the years is it's like I recognize people. When I meet them, I go, oh, you're one. You know what this is about. And so it's just been a really exciting and energizing process for all of these years. And when I go to the concept of unity, I have to think about a conference that was the Global Action Conference in 1992. It was happening the same time as the Earth Summit in Rio de Janeiro. And there were 5 people that had been brought as presenters to this Global Action Conference. One of them was actually from the United Nations, and that's a whole nother story, but it was, one of them was with the Global Energy Network International. It was called GENI. And what he did was he used Buckminster Fuller's Dymaxion map, where you're looking at the Earth from the North Pole, and we are all connected. And his presentation was that if we just put together, if we just cooperate, if we can just figure out how to cooperate enough that we can connect all of the energy grids of all the nations in the world, why then the dark side can be lit up by the light side of the world. Easy. We could do that. And so it began a process of, so who wants to play with that idea? Who's doing this kind of thing? And we start connecting. And so my role is to connect people. And I guess the ultimate embodiment of that is that I'm now writing a story about a little girl named Pacha, who is a unifier. Actually, she's got a book, and we're writing the sequel to this. And it's she has a little video that is she sings "We Are All Connected," and we are doing that with children around the world. And asking them to send in videos. So this idea of unity is something that's alive in me, and I feel like I can help people to reach that by getting into the child part of themselves, no matter what age they are. And people love to sing and dance, and so we're going to play with this.
So it's interesting that there is a very keen sense of a shift in the cultural zeitgeist where the values that people have on sort of a larger scale, but also just within the communities that are in our own backyards, where people are more and more, it's come into my experience, asking the question, do things have to be this way? Can they be another way? Is there another way of doing? Is there another way of being? And as those questions are asked, they come with a great potentiality, right? There's a lot of opportunity there to harness that energy, as Sue is saying, and build connections that are then actionable, right? That's kind of what the biggest value in it is for me, is that this is, I guess there's that old saying, strike while the iron is hot. So there is this feeling that there's a lot of potentiality that a lot of individuals are carrying, and how we can help individuals anchor into that, be not only aware of the spaces that are created for co-creative expression, but how, as I've seen as a challenge for a lot of people, as Sue said, just that regular person, the people who have a heart for work, that want to be able to plug in spaces and know that they can do so at the scale that they're comfortable with, whatever their readiness level is. How would either of you, and it's open to both of you, Dot and Rick, to speak relative to what is the pathway from which value becomes anchor, something that actually, and there is a kind of a transitional space of belief, a belief that I can do this, I can make a change, my value can manifest into something that creates that change and helps the momentum, or feeds the momentum of what is already happening. So in each of your own experiences, how has it been that you have communicated that idea of a self-belief, a self-efficacy, a self-determinism to individuals that you've come across that really have a heart and a passion to engage in this work? So to ostensibly create unity, right? So please.
So I'll begin the response, Rick, if that works for you. And I want to respond to Sue's sharing about the music and dance in particular. One of the great unifiers on the planet is the arts. And what we have found through our work is, regardless of what we are doing, how formal the proceedings might be even, music in particular is always part of it. And what we are learning, thanks to heart math in particular, is that when we sing together, our hearts beat as one. And so when we talk about a co-creative emergent design process, in a way, there's nothing better to unify us. Think of choir, right? There's nothing better to unify us than coming together through music, through song, through dance, to offer us a sense of the confidence of being together in group freely, through loving support and through invitation and appreciation, which then allows us to begin to live from the inside out instead of the outside in. The outside in is, ooh, what will they think? Or, oh, maybe I need to know a little bit more before I do this. Or, ooh, whatever it is, I'm not quite ready. The inside out being that depth of understanding for each of us that we each have value and we each have a unique contribution to make. And we each have some wisdom somewhere within us that we can share through the heart somehow. So again, for me, it's the arts and beauty. It's a great unifier.
Yes. Thank you.
So yeah, I totally agree. And of course, I've had a 30+ year music career. So I have been right in there, and I totally resonate with the arts and culture being that transmitter of the ideas of unity. So what We the World does is actually we have like three kind of buckets, which of course interact, but in terms of getting people in the conversation and then taking action. So, and the first one will include the arts. It's inspire, inform, and involve. And we say three I's that make a we. Inspire, inform, and involve. So the inspire part that's where the arts lives. It's and it could be an inspiring speaker. It could be performers, like a festival with a theme where it's family friendly and people come in and they have fun and food and cultural exchanges and that kind of thing. And that's like reaching people at the heart level, when they're inspired. Now, if there's something in them that says, I want to go further, then they're kind of ready to get more information about something. So that's the informed part. They may want to go deeper into, let's say, an issue that they're interested in. It could be the environment or human rights or whatever it is. And then ultimately, the final stage would be to get involved and take some kind of action, which could mean going to a meeting or helping to organize an event that's coming up and working with others. And I know I had this same process of going through those, and that led me to eventually, create We the World and, all of this. And we find that our most successful programs combine all three attributes, inspire, inform, and involve. So anyway, thought that might be helpful.
No, that's actually, it's a beautiful expression, because it's important to be able to express a pathway in an easily consumable way. And for me especially, one of my biggest challenges has been living so much in a headspace that it is recently, in the past 18 months or so, with Sue being a very important partner in this process for me, but also another colleague of ours, Ann Kinnebrew, who works in the performative arts space, to really learn, for me on my part, to really learn how important it is to enter the heart space through this shared expression that occurs beyond language. For me, I live in a very dialogic space. It has its benefits and attributes. One of the drawbacks is it's very hard to get me to shut up. So that's an important thing that I've learned as a lesson. But coming into this space, and especially, Dot, as you mentioned it, that you use the word choir. Now, you've mentioned two things today that have really been very synchronous as well. The idea of the butterfly drying out its wings as the potentiating moment. That's something that we've heard from a recent colleague of ours as well. But this idea of the choir, Sue, how do you refer to that? What is that expression that you have around the choir?
Oh, well, I love Martin Luther King's beloved community. And I figure we have a beloved community choir. And so we're just helping people to find their voice and be able to sing along with this wonderful song, whatever it is. And then we have so many to work with and wonderful musicians. We've got Rick and his team that have made a new theme song for We the World. And we've got our friend Earthman Lanny Smith, who's going on a tour of Florida with his concerts, and his Come In Planet Earth, Are You Listening is one of my favorites. gosh, we've got Pacha and her connected dance. We've got a bunch of songs that will be part of a kind of a program that we're putting together for these next 2 years on the road to 2020. And we're just going to be seeing what we can do.
Beautiful. You know, it's one of the things that's very heartening is so many of us are recognizing around the world in so many different circles that we are approaching a true tipping point moment. And as folks come together, perhaps in my own travels, perhaps the greatest difference that I perceive in talking with people, and you just triggered this for me, Sue, is it's not so much people speaking about I and me and what I'm doing or whatever, but really recognizing at this point that they're part of a team, part of a group in the community or in the region or in their country or what in the world, you know, and talking about global citizenry and what that means. And while we may have however we choose to express our divinity and whatever culture we are living within in a given moment in time, nonetheless, we are recognizing the fact that we are indeed one human family. And as we live that into expression, and we're talking about the how to do that, and have always loved, appreciated, and used, Rick, the 3 I's. So we really are moving from me to we. And it seems like the new peace sign, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
So
That's right.
yeah, that's a really important expression in the sense that, you know, as we come to that understanding of the power that resides in that solidarity of expression, that coming together in a group. I mean, one of my favorite expressions is Margaret Mead's about the idea of what can happen when even a small group can engender a shared lived expression around something that is very important to all of those members. You know, that expression about the choir engenders that understanding that in the greatest coming together and the greatest expression and the greatest success that choir may have in a particular moment, it comes through the harmony that they can achieve. Everyone is especially situated in exactly the spot where they feel that their expression is strongest. And when that clicks, that then, to me, it's not necessarily the other side of the coin relative to unity, but to me, it seems like a more ontological understanding that unity is achieved through that harmony that is arrived at in a particular moment. Now, to the idea of involvement as the third of the 3 I's, there is, and perhaps it's not necessarily at that node either, it may even be at the node of inform. There is the idea of creating unity that I want to go back to amongst the change makers, amongst individuals, which is ostensibly everyone. I mean, everyone from any community space as they enter into this work then is a change maker in whatever space that they occupy. But to understand the connections between something like an economic injustice in a community that may situate that community in a food desert. There is not access to transportation, adequate housing, and especially nourishment, right? So if that is in fact the case in that particular space, but there is also a group that is very much focused on perhaps another space relative to a work in racial injustice and racial disparity that may occur in community, connecting those two spaces has often proved a challenge, even though there is great intersectionality there. But the understanding of that intersectionality on a theoretical basis doesn't necessarily translate into collaboration, bringing funding sources together, really being able to then grow the choir in that particular space. So again, either of you can speak to, and both speak to this idea of how to engender that kind of unity in that kind of space.
Yeah, I would say that that is a challenge, and we could even think of it as the challenge for our time, because if we don't come together, if the change makers and the groups don't come together in an unprecedented way, then we may not be able to address the very real challenges and tipping points. I mean, we have a bunch of tipping points that could be disastrous. I mean, one of the things that got me involved initially in the 1990s was I heard about the sixth mass extinction of species on the planet. I forget, it was the son of Louis Leakey. His name is Richard Leakey. He wrote that original book, The Sixth Great Extinction, or Sixth Mass Extinction. And we're now at the point where if we don't make a tremendous change in what we're doing, that mass extinction of species may become irreversible, leading to collapsing parts of the food chain and all of that. And people are saying the same thing about climate change. And we're talking very soon, we're talking about within the next 5 to 10 years, where those things could become irreversible, and they, of course, interact, climate change and the continuing mass extinction of species on our planet. So if we don't find a way to come together to address the massive obstacles to peace and sustainability that we have, they're political obstacles, economic, and many other things, then we could be dooming the people in the future, ourselves and future generations, to a very difficult planet. And so one of the things that we do with We the World is we have a kind of a strategy which we call open architecture, which allows for organizations to kind of plug in and begin to work with each other without demands on them that would require so much, attention that would make it prohibitive. So we have almost 100% success rate with getting people or organizations to participate, for example, in 11 days and these 11 campaigns for change, because of that open architecture. So I think that's a very powerful thing. And part of the concept is really, it comes down to nonviolent communication for me, because I've been very involved with nonviolent communication over the years. And one of the most powerful aspects of it is the ability or learning how put yourself in the shoes of the person you're in front of, or maybe someone you're in conflict with, for example. So we do the same thing with partners. So, if there's an organization that is interested in, they have their mission or whatever, we say, okay, what can we do to help you with your mission? What are your needs? So it's a way of making those connections. And so when you're talking about intersectionality and that kind of thing, I think it's important to start from the place of where they are coming from, that organization, what their needs are, and how can working together achieve something that they can't achieve on their own. In fact, if you go to we.net, we have a little video there that Desmond Tutu and Jane Goodall narrate, and one of the big questions is, what can we do together that we can't do on our own? And that's a way to address that, I think. So.
Yeah, beautifully said. And brings up so many things for me, as you share. One is the understanding for all of us that unmet needs drive behavior. And so from that springs so much. But I want to say that the move through, as you have said now so eloquently, Rick, is really a solutions-oriented approach. And Sue and Suraj, you have both spoken to that early on in this conversation. And that solutions-oriented approach is the only way, really, that we kind of feel our way through the law of magnetic attraction and move through into a co-creative process together where everyone's needs get met. Because that's really what has to happen. So one of the places I enjoy cooperating is Mohonk Retreat House in New Paltz, New York. And they have a Talk It Over at Mohonk. And they're doing a big peace conference for their 150-year celebration in 2019. But focused on a solutions-oriented approach to building peace. I want to tell a very quick story from bioeconomics. In 1894, there was the Great Horse Manure Crisis. Literally, that's what it was called, right? Because around the world, so many cities were now jam-packed with horses because all of us humans around the world pretty much had at least one horse, and horses pulled buses, and they pulled taxis, and they pulled people and food and everything else. Well, there was a big horse dung problem, and it was so terrible that some folks in New York City said in 1897 or 98, let's come together for 10 days from all over the world, and we can figure this out. So they all came together to focus on the problem of the Great Horse Manure Crisis. And after 2 days, they threw up their hands and they said, this is impossible. We can't figure this out. We're doomed. We give up. And little did they know that just around the corner in the next century, Henry Ford and a couple of others would come up with a quite remarkable solution to this issue. And it's a standout in my mind that we recognize that the solutions are always there. They're always within us as group, right? As humanity. And so as we turn our attention to what we want, instead of always focusing on what we don't want and trying to fix what's wrong, let's look through to that solutions-oriented approach. And that is, for me, the direct answer to the question that you posed.
Yes.
That's beautifully put. And that's it's very relevant to me because even as you mentioned, that the concepts around the law of attraction, that's very relevant in the sense that we often do focus our attentions and unintentionally focus all our energies on the problem rather than actually problematizing what is happening in front of us to actually begin to see that there is possibility. And, recognizing that possibility may not be present, it may be growing, it may be evolving, it may be able to manifest a bit down the road or perhaps a generation later, and yet we still feel active because we are operating in a space of possibility rather than a space that is a barrier. Exactly. So that's beautifully put between both of you. So I'd like to say that, relative to our discussion on unity, I think we've really covered something important today because it's transitioned. I mean, we've transmuted this idea from a theoretical concept that is one that fills us, as you had said, Rick, originally, that, this is a journey from fear to hope. So it does fill us with hope as a concept, but it is often not very tangible and not very tangible in the moment. So we've addressed those ideas of how to create a very intentional path. Yeah. And then as we create that intentional path towards unity, also to learn how to come together and wait for the resources to develop, to come into a space of cohesion when we can really be actionable about what we want to do. So I think another aspect of understanding came up in that, which is, as a takeaway for me, is having an awareness of how we approach preparedness for the moment, within the group, within the coalition. So I'd like to kind of close with that idea, which I've always liked, even in university spaces in which I've taught, just to get a sense that everyone has some understanding they're taking away in terms of a classroom. So I've always called it kind of a learning shot, a takeaway moment. What's that kind of concept? So perhaps from each of you, and Sue, why don't we start with you for this, just to close out, is a sense of that learning shot, that takeaway from today's engagement and today's exchange.
Well, I guess the image that I'm left with here is that we are sowing a culture of peace, and that something is evolving and growing, and we may not have the full picture of it, but we know that we are in process, and that's good enough for today.
Indeed. Dot, how about for you?
Well, I'm going to call on Wendell Berry for my final sharing, based on your invitation. What we need is here. Geese appear high over us, pass, and the sky closes. Abandoned, as in love or sleep, holds them to their way, clear in the ancient faith. What we need is here. And we pray not for new earth or heaven, but to be quiet in heart and in eye, clear. What we need is here.
Lovely.
Yeah.
And for you, Rick?
Sure. So, well, first I wanted to remind people that there's an open invitation for anyone who wants to share the good work that they are doing. They can do that, or we have a mechanism for that. If you go to we.net, there's something called the Global Unity Calendar, and you can post, it's a free public international calendar, and there is an approval process before things get posted, but anyone can post from around the world. So you can find that at we.net, and it's a way of connecting all the change makers. And it also, when you post on the calendar, it appears on other organizations' calendars too. For example, the Compassion Games, it's synchronized, and we're expanding that. So it's really a wonderful resource, and there are other resources as well, but that's one I wanted to mention. So in terms of coming together, from our perspective, it's all about we and expanding we to include not just coming together in terms of humans, but also expanding our sense of empathy and connection with the entire web of life and even the ecosystems that support life, like mountains and rivers and oceans and all of that. So that, in fact, and if you go to we.net, you'll see those pictures. It's not just pictures of all different kinds of humans there. We see pictures of dolphins and ponds and rivers and all of that. So I just want to leave you with what our good friend and colleague Jonathan Granoff said, and you know him, Dot, very well. Jonathan Granoff is on our advisory board, and he did the keynote address at, when we launched the We campaign, which was when we first launched we.net and that kind of thing. And at the end of his speech, he said, "I hope that we expands so much that there is no longer any them." And later he told me, wow, that's amazing. It just came to me. I didn't even plan to say that, but it's so perfect.
Wonderful. Well, on behalf of Sue and I both, we wanted to thank you, Rick, and thank you, Dot, both for joining us today for this inaugural telesummit relative to unity to start off the 11 days of global unity. And we will see you both again relative to the closing of this process on International Day of Peace with a telesummit on a similar type of exchange around peace building. So we will look forward to seeing you again.
Thank you. Thank you so much.